Hello there, my friend. Picture this. You're standing on a bustling Roman dockside in 70 CE. A crowd gathers as four unlucky criminals are stitched into a giant leather sack, together with a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey. These poor souls were convicted of parricide, killing their own fathers. The sack is hoisted, swung once, twice, then splosh, tossed straight into the Tiber. The onlookers cheer, place bets on which animal will bite first, and then head off for lunch like nothing happened. If you think your last speeding fine stung, wait till you hear the rest of Rome's creative justice system. A multitude of history's strangest punishments are about to parade past you, toga and all. Why look at ancient Roman punishments at all? Because they're a window into Roman minds. Rome was loud, proud, and very public about everything, especially crime. The Republic and later the Empire wanted people to see what happened when you broke the rules. Fear kept order better than any marble statue or fancy speech from the Senate. Roman trials weren't tucked away in quiet courtrooms. They happened in the forum, under the open sky, with a lively audience munching street vendor olives. Elite lawyers like Cicero spun clever arguments, but when judges finally spoke, the true drama began. Punishments doubled as free entertainment. Think of them as the Netflix of the day, only bloodier and with no monthly fee. Yet, to modern ears, many penalties sound bonkers. Why throw someone off a cliff when jail would do? But Romans believed the punishment had to fit the crime in a symbolic way. Betray your city? You're flung from the Tarpeian Rock, literally cast out of Rome. Kill your father, the man who gave you life. You lose yours inside a sack with four living symbols of household chaos. Every sentence told a moral story the crowd could read at a glance. The empire sprawled across 3 continents. Keeping millions in line meant projecting strength daily. Public executions, especially in the Colosseum, reminded provinces from Gaul to Judea who was boss. A town that watched rebels eaten by lions didn't need a lecture on loyalty. Even military punishments, like decimation, where every 10th soldier was killed by his own unit, were designed to travel by rumour faster than any legion could march. Now, I'm not here to glorify gore. We'll keep things lively, poke gentle fun at Rome's over-the-top methods, and avoid the grim details that might make dinner uncomfortable. Yes, we'll talk snakes, cliffs, and lions, but we'll also meet emperors who punished boredom itself, and soldiers who survived by pure dumb luck. If you enjoy tonight's story, I'd really appreciate it if you could give it a like, subscribe, or maybe comment on where you are listening from. So whether you are getting ready to settle down for the night, looking for a distraction from work or study, or maybe just looking to relax for a while, you've found the right place. Quiet the noise of the modern world, sit back, relax, and we will begin our journey. Rome lasted over 1,000 years. Laws shifted, emperors tinkered, and regional governors improvised. Not every punishment was served everywhere, every time, but each one is well attested in at least one period, and often echoed for centuries. Think of them as greatest hits from the imperial naughty list. So, grab your imaginary amphitheatre cushion, maybe a handful of olives, and settle in. Over the next hour or so, we'll time travel through courts, camps, and cliff edges, meeting emperors having bad days and criminals having worse ones. Along the way, we might just learn why modern justice, for all its flaws, looks downright gentle beside Rome's roaring crowds and creative cruelty. Imagine strolling into the Forum Romanum on a bright morning in 55 BCE. Marble temples gleam, fresh-baked bread mingles with goat, and voices bounce off stone. Today's headliner isn't a senator or a statue, it's the law performing live and free for anyone with ears. Modern courts hide behind doors marked silence. Rome, however, preferred street theatre. Small wooden platforms called tribunalia dotted the square. On each sat a praetor, a senior magistrate, flanked by scribes scratching on wax. Passers-by leaned on columns and judged the judges. Lawyers like Marcus Tullius Cicero projected their voices the way rock singers hit high notes. Good lungs were job security. Rome's first code, the 12 Tables, 451 BCE, was blunt. Lose a suit and refuse to pay, the winner could seize you or, legends claim, cut you in half. Over time, new statutes, edicts, and Senate resolutions piled on. When emperors arrived, one snap decree from Augustus or Trajan could wipe out years of precedent. By the 2nd century CE, a lawyer needed a cart just for scrolls. Citizens, adult Roman males, held the magic phrase civis Romanus sum. Early on, they could appeal a death sentence to the People's Assembly, later, straight to the emperor. Women, freedmen, and foreigners had fewer cards. Slaves had none. Their testimony counted only after a whipping, because pain guaranteed truth, so said Roman logic. Class mattered too. Senators could not be crucified. That warning billboard was for rebels and the poor. Fines scaled with wealth, yet slick advocates still helped the rich walk free. Courts opened at dawn when sunlight hit the rostra. Litigants scrambled for a good slot. Hearings were first come, first served. Street vendors sold figs and cheap wine to restless onlookers. Trials paused at midday for lunch. No verdict was worth missing a hot bowl of lentils. Proceedings wrapped by sunset. Few citizens fought alone. Most attached themselves to a powerful patron, a senator or ex-consul, who offered advice, lined up character witnesses, or greased palms. In return, the client voted for the patron and joined noisy claque squads that cheered at key moments. Think law firm meets fan club. So now let's jump into our first punishment. The sun is barely up when the herald shouts the verdict. A young man, eyes wild with dread, has been found guilty of killing his father. All around the forum, stallholders stop stacking figs. Even the stray cats pause mid-stretch. Parricide is Rome's worst family sin, so the city saves a special fate for it, one that makes every bystander whisper, "Glad that isn't me." Soldiers march the culprit down to the riverbank, where 4 angry animals are waiting in cages. First comes a dog, snarling at the rope around its neck. A dog stands for loyalty betrayed, the very thing the murderer has just trampled on. Next is a rooster, flapping and crowing. Romans say the bird greets the sun, so its presence mocks the darkness of the crime. A slithering viper follows, symbol of hidden danger. And finally, a monkey, chosen because nothing looks more twisted than a creature that mocks human gestures while never quite being human. The crowd knows the drill. A leather sack, thick as an ox-hide shield and twice as smelly, lies open on the ground. 2 lictors push the young man forward. He stumbles, but there is nowhere to run. By law, he has already been stripped of citizenship, his very name wiped from public memory. Into the sack he goes, wrists tied so the animals can't be choked. The monkey is tossed in next, screeching in outrage. The rooster follows, feathers flying. The dog fights hardest, snapping at any limb it can reach. Last and worst comes the viper, carried on a forked stick. When its coils hit the man's bare ankles, he screams. The sound makes a nearby senator wince, but no one steps in. Justice must be done, and, more importantly, must be seen to be done. 4 sailors begin stitching the mouth of the sack with heavy cord. This is nasty, sweaty work. Waxed thread sticks to their palms, and the animals inside thrash wildly. Every thump makes river water slap against the pier, as though Tiber himself is impatient. When the final knot is tied, the sailors slide a thick pole through 2 side loops. With a heave, they lift the wriggling bundle and sway toward a waiting barge. The boardwalk creaks underfoot. One girl in the front row buries her face in her mother's cloak. A crafty gambler, sensing the moment, calls out odds on whether the rooster or the snake will survive longest. Rome may be an empire of laws, but it is also an empire that loves a wager. How did this grim ritual begin? The stories trace back to the Republic, maybe around 100 BCE, though some say the 12 tables hinted at earlier versions. At first, only a dog and a rooster joined the condemned. Later, writers list the full menagerie. Each animal, they explain, mirrors a twisted household. The dog is the faithful guardian turned foe. The rooster is the timekeeper that calls, "Wake up," yet now witnesses a family's darkest night. The viper brings poison into the bloodline, and the monkey is the ultimate parody of a son who should have been human but acts like a beast. Practical minds sometimes asked, why not just behead the criminal and be done? Roman lawyers answered that parricide is an offence so foul the earth itself must not be stained by the murderer's blood. Sewing him into cowhide keeps soil pure, and drowning him ensures no grave can honour him. Even the water rejects his corpse. Once the sack sinks, the current carries it out to sea, away from Rome's sight and smell. Symbolism piles on symbolism. Romans loved a moral that could be sketched in a single unforgettable image. Not every era carried out the punishment exactly the same. Under the early emperors, exile was occasionally offered if the killer confessed and his family begged mercy. Constantine, the first Christian emperor, tried to replace Poena Cullei with simple beheading, judging the old ritual too pagan. Yet even he kept the sack on the books. Later rulers bounced back to it whenever they wanted a public lesson in obedience. One dusty parchment from the reign of Hadrian tells of twin brothers sewn into separate sacks because the court could not decide which had struck the fatal blow. Equal guilt, equal doom. For all its horror, the spectacle carried a strange slapstick energy. Monkeys, after all, do not like cramped spaces. Dogs bite anything that moves. A crowded sack turns into a living cartoon of flailing claws, talons, teeth, and tail. Suetonius, Rome's gossip-in-chief, notes one case where the monkey actually escaped through a weak seam, hopped onto a guard's head, and stole his helmet before diving back into the riverbank reeds. The condemned man, alas, did not share that agility. Observers could afford gallows humour because Poena Cullei was vanishingly rare. Most years passed without a single parricide case. That rarity, paradoxically, boosted the punishment's mythic power. Every Roman child heard the tale from a schoolmaster, "Honour your father, or meet the sack." The threat hovered like a thundercloud, keeping countless kitchen quarrels from boiling over. A few later thinkers tried to poke holes in the logic. The philosopher Seneca, always fond of moral puzzles, asked whether the animals deserved to die alongside the criminal. Stoic senators grumbled that the monkey in particular was expensive to import. Better, they said, to reuse the same beast like a court prop. No decree ever settled the debate because legal theatre was never just about efficiency. It was about the story Rome told itself, that family bonds were sacred, and anyone who snapped them would be cast out both from land and from light. Back on the riverbank, the barge pushes off. Oars dip, splash, and rise. The crowd follows along the quay, keeping pace with morbid curiosity. In the middle of the channel, the sailors pause. One gives a nod, another tips the pole, and the sack splashes into the water. It bobs once, twice, then begins to sink, air leaking through the seams like groans from a distant cave. The rooster's last squawk bubbles up, the dog's growl fades. Within moments only ripples remain, spreading outward in widening rings until they melt into the ordinary clutter of river traffic. A grain ship from Ostia sails past as though nothing special has happened. People drift away, already chatting about lunch. A fishmonger jokes that tonight's stew may taste of rooster. A lawyer hurries to another hearing. Life flows on, but every witness carries the image of that sinking bundle, a floating warning that the gods, the law, and the city will always eventually have their due. The lesson spreads faster than the water. By sundown, gossips in taverns a mile away are repeating it. "Did you hear? They used the full 4 beasts this morning." Children tug at sleeves and beg for details. And somewhere far downstream, the Tiber rolls over its latest secret, carrying it toward the sea and oblivion. And now we move on. Rome will stage yet another act of legal drama, and our tour will keep pace. Next stop, the Colosseum floor, where condemned criminals meet claws and jaws in the lunchtime show Romans called damnatio ad bestias. Pack a picnic, just not a live chicken, and come see what happens when justice turns the arena into a dining hall. A lazy noon sun beats down on Rome, and crowds drift toward the Colosseum as though pulled by an invisible rope. Bakers close their stalls early, children ride on fathers' shoulders, waving small fig branches like parade flags. Midday in the arena is a special slot on the city's entertainment calendar. Morning has already served chariot races, and late afternoon will bring gladiator duels. Right now, though, it is time for a different kind of spectacle. The animal sentence the Romans call damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts. The noise begins long before anyone steps onto the sand. Vendors hawk salted almonds and watered wine, pickpockets mix with senators in spotless togas. A brass band of army trumpeters sends out 3 short blasts. That signal does not announce music, it announces lunch if you are lucky to sit in the seats, not stand in the center. Hidden under the wooden floor, dark cages open one by one on winch chains that squeal like angry gulls. Lions from Numidia, bears shipped from the cold forests of Germania, and leopards caught in Syria pace in tight circles, smelling fresh air at last. Keepers prod them with burning torches to stir their tempers. Every beast is hungry. The managers starved them for 2 days so they would pounce on cue. Rome understands show business. A painted signboard carried past the imperial box lists the crimes. 1 man forged a will, another looted a temple, 2 women, captured rebels from Gaul, used guerrilla ambushes against a Roman patrol. For run-of-the-mill theft a flogging might do, but offences that offend both state and gods often call for something that no one can forget. Prison is expensive, a lion eats the evidence. The condemned march out tied together by a single rope, but they are not stripped naked or shoved roughly. Rome likes style. Each prisoner wears a costume that mocks the crime. The forger is dressed in a scribe's stained tunic, the temple thief in what looks like priestly robes turned inside out. The rebel sisters still wear their Gaulish tartan cloaks, bright checkers that clash against the beige sand like spilled wine on white marble. At one end of the arena stands a wooden stage set that looks like a miniature sacred grove, painted trees, fake rocks, a little spring made of bronze piping, all scenery built this morning. The audience gasps and nudges one another. They know what comes next, a myth theatre execution. It is not enough for the criminals simply to die. They must act out a story so the lesson sticks to every mind like pitch. A herald with a booming voice announces the script. Act out the tale of Dirce torn by bulls. The crowd cheers because they have heard of it in school. The temple thief is chained to a wheeled platform shaped like a woman, while 2 snorting bulls wait at opposite sides, yokes ready. The Romans love matching myth to misdeed. If you robbed a holy place, you face a holy revenge. Out of a side gate tramps an apparitor, a stage manager in an orange hat. Holding a chalked slate, he checks positions, counts prisoners, then raises his arm to the emperor's box. Today the emperor is not present, he is touring the provinces. In his place sits the praefectus urbi, the city prefect, drumming his fingers on the rail. He gives a small, bored nod. The slate drops, the gate slams, and the arena floor becomes the worst petting zoo in world history. A hidden trapdoor clacks open. 2 adult lions leap into sunlight, manes throwing up dust. They pause, eyes adjusting, then smell the nearest movement. 1 lion chooses the forger, perhaps because the scribal ink on his tunic smells like animal glue. A deep roar booms off stone seats. Some spectators squeeze their eyes shut. Others lean forward, mouths open. This is not the drawn-out torture of crucifixion. It is sudden, messy, and over quickly, though not quick enough for the man caught under a paw the size of a dinner plate. The bulls refuse to move at first. They sniff the ropes, more interested in each other than in theatre. Keepers with fiery brands shout curses too coarse for a family show. At last the animals surge in opposite directions. The rope pulls tight, and the temple thief's stage carriage lurches forward toward a canvas screen painted with grapevines. When the dust clears, the grove scenery lies broken, and the thief is gone. Even in Rome, not every detail works as planned, but the result is the same. A startling death served with a hint of farce. From a shaded arcade, a group of bestiari, animal fighters, stand ready as backup. These professionals in bronze helmets and leather guards carry spears tipped with hooks. If an animal loses interest in the prisoners and begins to stalk the crowd, the bestiari rush forward to distract it. They are halfway between zookeepers and stuntmen, paid well but short-lived. One helmet bears 30 notches, each for a saved spectator. The man beneath it limps from an old bear swipe, but still grins like a tavern joker. A sudden murmur ripples through the upper tiers. A lion has turned toward the rebel sisters, but then stops, head cocked. One girl has begun to sing a lullaby in her native tongue, a tune her tribe uses to calm horses. The animal blinks, tail swinging, uncertain. For a few heartbeats, the entire Colosseum goes silent, as though Rome itself is holding its breath. Then a gate clanks and a second lion appears. The sisters drop their song, clasp hands, and run. There is nowhere to go except left or right, so they circle the arena wall like dancers chased by a stage curtain. A section of the crowd actually laughs. Tragedy bleeds into comedy. That thin line is why Romans keep showing up. Not every condemned person dies. Ancient writers tell of Androcles, a runaway slave who once pulled a thorn from a lion's paw in the desert. Years later, captured and sent to the arena, he faced that same lion. The beast supposedly recognized him, licked his face, and refused to attack. The emperor, often said to be Caligula or perhaps Claudius, pardoned slave and lion alike, turning a blood show into a feel-good headline. Modern scholars doubt every detail, but the tale survives because Romans adored a surprise twist, and because mercy, when rare, tasted sweeter than wine. When the sand finally settles, crews in plain tunics hurry out with rakes to cover remains with fresh earth. Perfume boys sprinkle saffron water so the next event starts with a pleasant smell. Official scribes record the number of prisoners, animals used, and any incidents worth noting, like the bull delay or a lion that refused meat, signs the gods might be displeased. Scrolls will be filed in dusty offices where lawyers will study them for precedent. Even fun has paperwork. The crowd flows out in streams, chattering about favourite moments. A child on the marble steps flaps his arms, pretending to be a leopard. Two matrons debate which beast was most frightening. One votes for the silent bear, the other for the singing lion. Business again starts in the city. Bankers tally ledgers, teachers scold pupils, bakers knead dough for dinner bread. Yet everyone who saw the show carries a shared memory, stamped deep as a signet ring. Cheating the state or mocking the gods brings more than a fine. It brings teeth. Our journey, however, is not near done. Beyond the city walls, legions tramp along dusty roads. Soldiers grumble, commanders frown, and discipline hangs by a thread. When that thread snaps, Rome has another answer: decimation. The lottery of death where losing a draw means losing your life to your best friend's clubs. You will not need a Colosseum seat for the next lesson. A parade ground will do. Join me there, if you dare. The red dust of Apulia hangs in the summer air as the legion trudges back to camp, shields clacking like tired cymbals. They have just lost a skirmish to Spartacus's rebel slaves, and the senior commander, Marcus Licinius Crassus, is in the sort of mood that makes men wish they were invisible. He has decided the army needs a lesson no one will forget. Decimation is an old Roman cure for cowardice, but it is used so rarely that many soldiers have only heard the word in whispered campfire tales. 1 man in 10, says the rumour, chosen by lot and beaten to death by his closest friends. The math alone makes knees shake. Every century, about 80 men, forms a line, and each soldier draws a little tile from a wooden pouch. 9 tiles are blank, 1 bears the fatal X. Lose the draw and your messmates raise clubs made of vine wood, the same sticks lictors carry beside magistrates. The victim does not face an outside enemy, he faces brothers in arms whose eyes he shared wine with last night. Crassus orders the horn to blow assembly. The soldiers stack their backpacks, forming a makeshift wall of kit. No one dares speak above a mutter. Centurions bark names. When each century is ready, a junior officer walks down the line with the pouch of fate. You can tell yourself the odds are small, but the pouch doesn't know or care. A veteran named Lucius, second scar over his left eye, dips a hand, pulls a blank, and exhales so loudly the next man glares at him. Further down, a fresh recruit named Marcus, he turned 18 last month, draws the X. For a heartbeat he thinks it is some sort of joke, because the mark is no bigger than a kitchen scratch. Then he hears the order, step forward. By tradition, those who draw blank tiles form a ring around the unlucky ones. They are not forced to watch. They are forced to take part. Each is handed a cudgel. The logic, as Roman jurists explain, is simple. Guilt is collective, so punishment is collective. A legion that ran once must prove it will never run again. Killing your friend is a pledge made in blood and splinters. A tribune reads Crassus's charge sheet: dereliction of duty, loss of the eagle standard, general shame. Then he steps back. The centurions give no speech. The time for speeches is over. Clubs rise. Marcus tries to look his comrades in the eye, maybe hoping to see pity. What he sees is terror, the same terror in his own chest, because each striker knows that if the legion fails again, the numbers might come up differently. The first blow lands on his shoulder and knocks him sideways. The second catches his cheek. The ring tightens. Thuds mix with gulping sobs. Some hits glance off, others crunch deep. Romans rarely describe the gore in letters home, they focus on the moral. Livy tells of a decimation in 471 BCE, where the survivors slept outside the ramparts with rations of barley, a grain usually fed to livestock. It was hunger plus horror, lesson doubled. In Crassus's camp the barley comes later. For now it is enough that Marcus at last lies still, and the dust begins to settle on his tunic, turning red cloth to brown. 9 men remain from Marcus's tent group. They lower their clubs, hands shaking, shoulders slick with sweat despite the dry breeze. Oddly, none are formally pardoned. Decimation is both punishment and purification, and there is no certificate to frame afterward. They will march at the front of tomorrow's column, because a commander who orders decimation usually believes the unit is now rock solid. Roman writers argue whether decimation works. Some hail it as steel-edged discipline, others call it wasteful cruelty. Polybius, the Greek historian who admired Rome's system, notes that even hardened veterans turned pale at the mere threat, which was often enough. Yet Appian showed that after Crassus performed decimation twice, his troops fought so fiercely they drove Spartacus south like a storm drain clearing mud. Success, it seems, is measured by bodies left on the field, enemy bodies this time. The procedure evolves over centuries. In Caesar's legions, decimation is almost never used. He prefers targeted executions or pay cuts, believing morale depends on shared victory more than shared dread. During the chaotic year of the Four Emperors, Vitellius threatens decimation against units that waffle between rival claimants, but the threat alone moves them to reform. Even emperors understand the arithmetic. Reduce your forces by 10% too often, and you weaken the very sword you want to sharpen. Despite the numbers, something about decimation keeps it lodged in popular imagination. Perhaps it is the lottery element, that cold math of chance. A man can brace himself for death in battle. Steel meets steel and skill matters. But how do you brace for a square of ivory in a bag? There is no shield against luck. Roman commanders exploit that dread the way a street magician exploits surprise. You keep your audience spellbound because anything might happen next. Around campfires for years afterward, surviving legionaries tell and retell the story. Some emphasize Crassus's stern face, others the dust cloud that rose as clubs fell. One detail never changes: the silence just before the first blow, broken only by the distant bleat of goats on a hillside. Silence is unusual in a Roman camp. Tool hammers, dice games, arguments and flute tunes usually overlap like threads in a woven cloak. But in that patch of silence, men heard their own heartbeats, and the lesson hammered deeper than any vinewood rod. Humour creeps in over time because soldiers need jokes the way armour needs oil. 10% discount on rations tomorrow, quips a legion cook months later, ladling soup. The line groans but smiles. Darkness turns to folklore, and folklore to cautionary tale. Recruits joining years hence will swear they can still see faint red stains outside the perimeter ditch, though rain has washed the soil 100 times. Modern historians puzzle over statistics. If a legion numbered roughly 5,000, a full decimation might remove 500 in a single afternoon, plus a matching dose of morale trauma. Archaeological digs at ancient campsites rarely find mass graves large enough, suggesting commanders often stopped at token numbers. Perhaps 1 century in 10 rather than one man. The threat matters more than the arithmetic. Rome is good at theatre, even on a parade ground. When dawn breaks after Crassus's grim evening, the columns form up. The 9 men from Marcus's tent stand front row, armour freshly polished, faces drawn thin. Trumpets sound the advance. They march south toward a rendezvous on the Salarius River, where Spartacus waits behind makeshift barricades. This time, when arrows whistle overhead and rebel war cries rise, not one legionary thinks of turning. Some might call it courage, some blunt survival instinct, others terror pushed inside out. Whatever the name, Crassus gets the victory he wants, and the Senate back in Rome sighs with relief over their breakfast olives. Years later, schoolmasters teaching young Romans might gloss over the uglier parts, praising discipline while skipping splinters and screams. But every veteran knows the real verse behind the official lyric. Rome enforces unity not only with eagles and trumpets, but with the dreadful knowledge that a friend's club can fall as swiftly as an enemy's sword. Our march through punishments continues, yet the road bends from battlefield to city gate. Ahead rises a wooden post and crossbeams set beside a dusty highway. The grim billboard Rome plants wherever it wants to make travellers think twice. Crucifixion awaits, slow and public, a sentence so notorious it needs no lottery to terrify. Bring water and shade your eyes. This will be a long afternoon on the cross. The spring air outside the walls of Capua smells of wild thyme and wagon dust, but nobody on the Via Appia notices the flowers. All eyes fix on a line of wooden posts that dots the roadside like a grim picket fence, each one ready to carry a message more powerful than any speech. Crucifixion is Rome's slow billboard. It stands where travellers must pass. It lasts for days rather than minutes, and it shouts a single word: obey. Sentencing happens in the forum, of course, but the business really begins in the barracks courtyard. Condemned prisoners. most often runaway slaves, bandits caught at the city gate, or rebels from the provinces, are tied to a whipping post and flogged until their backs look like torn sailcloth. The Romans call this flagrum work seasoning the wood, because the bleeding stripes will soon press against rough timber. The cruelty feels almost practical, like sanding a plank before paint. A centurion counts strokes aloud so the crowd outside can hear. Rhythm gives violence the shape of law. When the blows stop, each prisoner receives the patibulum, a heavy crossbeam of pine about the length of a tall man's wingspan. It weighs as much as a loaded shields pack, 40 kilos on a good day, more if the wood is fresh. The vertical pole, or stipes, is already waiting by the road, half buried so it stands upright like a lonely tree. Soldiers shove the condemned forward. Stumbling under splintered weight, they shuffle through the city gate, past fruit sellers who avert their eyes but keep on haggling prices. Markets absorb horror with the same ease they absorb gossip. As the march continues along the highway, a clerk walks ahead holding a placard chalked with the crime: latricinia for banditry, defectio for desertion, servus rebellis for a slave who dared resist. Sometimes the placard hangs later around the prisoner's neck so passers-by can read the lesson up close. Nothing about the drama is secret. Secrecy wastes good terror. At the execution ground, a small squad waits with ladders, hammers, and a bucket of iron nails the size of a carpenter's finger. Contrary to later paintings, Romans often tie the victim's arms to the crossbeam with rope first, then drive a single nail through each wrist to stop wriggling. Feet are either nailed separately to the post or pinned together on a wooden peg, a crude perch that prolongs life by giving shaky legs a place to press. Death by crucifixion is a tug-of-war between gravity and lungs. Suspended arms pull the ribcage upward. Breathing out becomes work. As exhaustion sets in, the chest freezes half full, like a bellows stuck mid-stroke. Heart and lungs drown in their own rhythm. None of this is rushed. A beheading wastes a spectacle in seconds. A cross might hold an audience for 3 days. Families pitch cook fires nearby and make a picnic of it. Children count how many black crows gather on the posts. Street poets improvise rude verses about squeals for water. Even soldiers grow bored and play dice at the foot of the poles, betting who will slump first. If a victim lingers too long, a kindly guard, or an impatient one, may jab a spear under the ribs to finish the job. Mercy and efficiency sometimes look the same at sunset. The most famous mass crucifixion follows the slave revolt of Spartacus. After the final battle in 71 BCE, Crassus orders 6,000 survivors nailed up along 120 miles of the Via Appia from Capua almost to the capital. Travellers heading north count bodies like milestones. The display lasts months until wind, rain, and scavengers strip the warnings clean. Roman chroniclers record the logistics with chilling pride. Carpenters drafted from local estates, nails shipped by wagon load, extra execution crews rotated so exhaustion will not spoil the craft. If decimation is a lesson for soldiers, crucifixion is a textbook for everyone else. Yet Roman law draws a sharp line. A citizen cannot be crucified except for the gravest treason, and even that is rare. When Verres, governor of Sicily, nails a citizen named Publius Gavius to a cross, young Cicero uses the outrage as a lightning bolt in court, roaring that Verres bound a Roman where only slaves should hang. Citizenship, then, is not just a passport, it is a shield against the post. Outsiders learn the rule quickly. One more reason provincial rebels fight hard or flee far rather than risk capture. Costs pile up too. Timber must be cut, nails smelted, guards paid to watch corpses until the crows finish their meal. A thrifty governor in Gaul writes home that he prefers a mass beheading for the savings in iron. Even in brutality, budgets bite. But sometimes money is the message. An emperor spending lavishly on crosses for rebel leaders signals he can afford any price to stay on top. Not all crosses stand beside roads. In Judea, local custom and hilly terrain push executions onto rocky slopes outside city walls, where the wind hums through scrub trees and sheep bells clink in distant fields. Romans adapt. A cross is portable power. What matters is the sight line. A traveller entering Jerusalem at Passover may glimpse three silhouettes against a late afternoon sky and remember the view longer than the temple's golden trimming. Eyes feed memory. Memory feeds obedience. Over time, small tweaks creep in. Under the Flavians, some crosses are built in a T-shape with no top spike, quicker to fashion from army tent poles. Domitian's engineers experiment with upside-down crucifixion for certain seditious priests, arguing that inverted bodies die faster. Philosophers mutter that Rome itself is standing on its head. The variations hardly comfort the condemned, who know any innovation will be tested on their skin first. The practice finally weakens in the 4th century when the Emperor Constantine converts to Christianity. Legend says he bans crucifixion outright around 300 CE, finding it both barbaric and uncomfortably close to the faith's central image. Edicts soften language, wooden punishment disappears from legal tables. But local governors still improvise when rebels threaten grain shipments. Old habits cling like ivy even as marble facades shift. Ask a modern medic and they will explain that nails through wrists damage the median nerve, sending waves of burning numbness down the arms. A doctor in a white coat might call the drowning in air process hypoxic asphyxia. Romans do not need the vocabulary, they watch and understand enough. A sailor doesn't need the word buoyancy to know whether a ship will float. Yet cruelty alone does not keep an empire upright. Spectacle must mate with story. Rome's story is that law is unbreakable, order eternal, and the state speaks louder than individual screams. The cross hammers that slogan into wood and flesh. Years later, roadside travellers remember not the names of the men who hung there, but the silence when they begged for water and none came. Silence, once again, proves more eloquent than rhetoric. When the last breaths rattle out, soldiers pry nails free, toss bodies into a shallow ditch, and burn the timber for campfire heat. The sight clears, but the moral stays, floating in dust motes across sunset fields. Traders heading home murmur, "Better pay the customs tax." A runaway slave, hearing the tale, hunches lower in his borrowed cloak, and a young provincial clerk scratching figures onto a wax tablet feels a shiver that tightens his handwriting. If Rome's law is a theatre, the cross is its standing ovation, grim and prolonged. Yet the show must move on, for courts are busy and imaginations fertile. In the cramped barracks of a frontier fort, another kind of justice waits, comrades forming a gauntlet, clubs ready, while a deserter prays for quick mercy. Fustuarium approaches, and we will walk that brutal corridor now. The camp of the 9th Legion smells of wood smoke and boiled barley, and for most of the men dusk should mean card games and jokes about paymasters. Tonight, though, a row of sharpened stakes forms a rough corridor between two lines of soldiers. Torches hiss in the damp evening air. Every helmet, once bronzed and shining, now feels like an iron weight on the necks beneath. A single name has been read out. Gaius Atilius, accused of sneaking over the palisade to gamble with local traders and spending 2 whole nights away from his post. In a frontier war, that is not just desertion, it is an invitation for raiders to slip in and steal horses. The legion's senior centurion has decided on fustuarium, the beating of the guilty man by the very friends he ate and marched beside. There is no random draw this time, no whispering hope that luck will spare the timid. Everyone knows exactly who will fall. Gaius stands at one end of the gauntlet, wrists tied, tunic ripped from shoulder to waist, so that every welt will land on bare skin. He was popular once, the sort who could juggle soldier pay tokens and make a small coin disappear behind a recruit's ear. Now, even the youngest recruit looks at him as if he carries plague. A single deserter can rot the discipline of a whole cohort, the officers warn, and rot must be cut away. The signal is simple: a thin reed whistle from the primus pilus. At that chirp, the first pair of legionaries step forward, sticks raised. Vine rods are light but dense, whippy enough to sting, heavy enough to crack ribs. The blows land with a hollow thud and a sharp snap like firewood splitting. Gaius grunts but stays upright for the first few paces, stumbling between the rows. The rules are fixed. Every man in the century must strike at least once. To show mercy, to pull the swing, is to risk accusation of sharing the crime. Being too kind can mark you next for the gauntlet. Shadows leap on tent walls as torches sway. The second pair swing harder, maybe hoping to finish the business quickly. But speed counts against them. A rod breaks after hitting Gaius's collarbone, and the splintered shaft whistles off into the dust. A few men near the rear flinch, suddenly imagining fragments spinning toward their shins. Fear is contagious in strange ways. Roman law books claim fustuarium began in the early Republic, reserved for theft, desertion, or false witness in the ranks. The writers use tidy phrases, correction by cudgel, that skim over blood and cracked cartilage. In practice, it is a psychological engine, turning buddies into executioners so that no one ever forgets the price of straying. Attilius's crime might earn just a fine in civilian life, but a legion on hostile ground cannot risk a sentry gap even for a heartbeat. Generals preach that laxity kills more soldiers than enemy swords. Halfway down the corridor, Gaius falters, knees buckle, he lands on one elbow. A murmur runs through the watching lines. If he collapses fully, the beating will drag on, bodies piling up to shove him forward. Two soldiers behind give him a quick boot, not out of cruelty but cold efficiency. Stand so the line can keep flowing. He staggers upright, eyes glossy under torchlight. Somewhere past the pain he must know that reaching the end does not save him. Few survive a completed gauntlet. The miracle lies in making the agony meaningful, taking step after step as though each stride buys back a scrap of honour. Save for grunts and the wet smack of vine on skin, the night is oddly quiet. Legionaries are chatty by nature, yet tonight they clamp their teeth. One man, call him Valens, swings, lands a glancing blow, then stares at his own shaking hand as if it were someone else's. He once swore to Gaius that they'd open a tavern in Ostia with their discharge pay. Another, senior enough to have fought in 2 provinces, does not hesitate. He cracks his rod across Gaius's spine with a clean, practiced motion. Discipline to him is thicker than friendship. He has seen a picket line crumble after one deserter slipped away. Modern readers sometimes confuse fustuarium with decimation. The difference is crucial. Decimation is chance, fustuarium is certainty. A unit guilty together might face decimation, but a single man who steals, deserts, or lies under oath earns the cudgels alone. Roman commanders keep both punishments in their toolkit the way a craftsman keeps hammer and chisel, different shapes for different cracks. Toward the gauntlet's end stands the medical orderly, Titus, carrying a ladle of vinegar water. He will pour a mouthful between Gaius's cracked lips if the officers allow. Sometimes they do, sometimes not. Mercy is a coin tossed on the whim of the commanding tribune. Tonight the tribune lifts 2 fingers in a grudging nod. The orderly steps in, tips the ladle. Most of the water dribbles down the punished man's chin, but a few swallows go in. They will likely leak out again in blood-tinged sputter, yet even the illusion of care keeps Rome's moral ledger balanced. Punishment, yes, but never outright torture, or so the jurists say. When Gaius finally reaches the last pair of sticks, no cheer rises. The rods drop to the ground, purple sap beading where the bark split. Two litter-bearers lift him onto a crude stretcher. If he breathes by dawn, he will face further hardship, loss of pay, ration of barley instead of wheat, camping outside the rampart. But most men who walk the gauntlet die within a day from shock and infection. One torch dies with a soft hiss in the dirt, smoke curling like a thin black ribbon over the scene. The century is dismissed with a curt, back to tents, no speech, no prayer. The lesson lies under every cloak. If you abandon your brothers, they will be ordered to abandon you in flesh. The silence that follows is thicker than any trumpet call. Later, a few men try to break tension with dark jokes. Next time Gaius gambles, he'd better win the cure for bruises. But laughter is thin and brittle. Officers claim fustuarium tightens discipline without wasting masses of manpower. A single example, well lit by torches, can steady an entire cohort. Yet letters from soldiers tell another side. Nightmares of swinging at a man's back, of hearing bones crack like dry twigs, of recognizing a friend only by the pattern of blood on sand. Rome's war machine marches on, but inside each iron helmet a private memory rattles loose like a pebble. By dawn, dew glistens on abandoned rods. Attilius's stretcher sits outside the infirmary tent, covered with a plain grey blanket. Nobody lifts it to check if he still breathes. Burial detail will know soon enough. Trumpets blare the morning signal. Life in camp snaps to usual rhythm. Cook fires, gear inspection, orders barked across the lines. But every man walks a little straighter toward the parade ground, shoulders square as shield panels. Fear, once again, has done its silent chore. Beyond the fort palisade, the river glints and hilltops fade into low cloud. A merchant caravan rattles past, unaware of last night's grim rite. Yet the men in the watchtowers, eyes red from sleeplessness, grip their javelins tighter. No one wants to be the missing sentry that invites the next disaster. For now, at least, the 9th holds firm. Our road back to Rome winds on, aiming for the sheer cliff that guards the city like a natural wall. Traitors know it by name. The Tarpeian Rock, where a short flight through the air ends in stone silence. Join the crowd gathering at the Capitoline's edge as we turn and watch loyalty tested by gravity. Dawn paints the Capitoline hill gold, but the mood around its sheer southern face feels anything but sunny. Citizens stream up the sloping stairs in little knots, senators in spotless clavy, apprentices still dusty from early morning bread shifts, even a gaggle of thrill-seeking teenagers who have clearly skipped school. Everyone knows today's headline: 2 conspirators have been convicted of plotting to sell military secrets to a Latin rival. Treason earns no half measures. It earns a quick, brutal lesson in gravity from a ledge called the Tarpeian Rock. The cliff itself is modest, just 20-odd meters. But in a city of mostly 2-story houses, it feels like a mountain edge. Stand at the top and you can see tiled roofs slide away toward the forum. Look straight down and there's nothing but jagged tufa and the occasional brave weed gripping a crack. Romans like their morals visible, and here visibility is perfect. Anyone entering the forum only has to tip the chin to glimpse where traitors fly. Legend says the custom began with Tarpeia, a greedy vestal who opened the gate of the early citadel to Sabine warriors in exchange for what they carried on their left arms. She thought gold bracelets. They gave her bronze shields, with crushing force. The Sabines paid, then dumped her from the cliff she had tried to betray. Whether the story is fact or campfire scare tactic, the name stuck, and so did the punishment. Betray Rome, take Tarpeia's route. A trumpet blast shivers the morning chatter into hush. Along the sacred way, soldiers appear in file. Between them walk the condemned. Publius Septimius, a junior tribune with more ambition than sense, and his alleged co-schemer, Lucius Fadius, a pay clerk who passed along marching orders for coin. Their togas have been stripped, Each wears only a short tunic tied with coarse rope. Onlookers whisper that the chill air must bite harder than the verdict. There is ritual to respect, even now. At a small altar beside the temple of Jupiter, best and greatest, a priest sprinkles salted flour on a brazier. Smoke gusts sideways, carrying prayers or warnings toward the rooftops. A crier calls in a sing-song voice, "Away with the wicked," 3 times. It is more theatre than liturgy, but Romans adore theatre. Hawkers take advantage, selling honey cakes to people who missed breakfast in the rush. Guards prod the pair forward until their sandals scrape the cliff's last flagstone. A thin, waist-high wall has been removed. The message is clearer without safety rails. Septimius tries to meet the crowd's gaze, as if a final speech might still bloom on his tongue. He once practiced rhetoric under a famous teacher. The centurion's supervising gives him no room. One firm hand on the shoulder, a sudden shove, and the would-be orator plummets head first. No scream hangs long in the air. Wind and gravity swallow it, replacing words with the dull thud of flesh against porous stone. Some spectators flinch, others exhale as if a wager has paid off. Fabius hesitates, knees buckling. In myth, traitors are hurled. In practice, many simply topple once the ground ends. Yet the guard repeats the formal push, making sure procedure is visible and blame is shared. Fabius twists mid-fall, arms flapping uselessly, and lands a heartbeat after his friend. 2 dust clouds pop up like theatre smoke, then drift south on the morning breeze. An orderly detachment trots the long path to the base to confirm death and drag the bodies to a refuse pit. Roman law denies traitors a proper burial. Earth is too honourable for them. Crows get the feast, and passerby gain a cautionary sight for days until scavengers finish the lecture. Standing near the edge, an older citizen murmurs, "Closer to the capital than the Tarpeian Rock," quoting the proverb that reminds ambitious men how swiftly honour can flip to ruin. Just a few dozen paces separate the temple of Jupiter, centre of power, from the cliff of disgrace. His grandson repeats the line, filing it away with multiplication tables and the date of Romulus's founding trench. History buffs in the crowd trade examples. Someone recalls Marcus Manlius Capitolinus, the hero who flung Gauls from these walls in 390 BCE, only to later denounce the Senate's debts and earn an accusation of aiming at kingship. For gratitude, the state later tossed him from this same perch. Loyalty, they joke, has a short shelf life. Another cites Spurius Cassius, the reform-minded consul executed for plotting tyranny in 485 BCE, though some say his own father swung the axe first, sparing him the drop. Over centuries, the ceremony changes little. Some years the city favours strangling high-value traitors in the Tullianum prison to avoid messy spectacles. Emperors with a softer streak might choose exile. But the cliff remains on the books, ready whenever Rome wants to remind citizens that betraying the community quite literally sends you out of it. Even language keeps the memory alive. Tarpeian danger signals any sudden reversal of fortune, the verbal equivalent of a trap door. Practical matters lurk behind the drama. The Capitoline slope under the cliff has to be cleared of rocks every few seasons so bodies do not snag and leave half-visible remnants. Nobody wants half a traitor waving at the marketplace. Engineers complain that repeated falls chip the cliff face, requiring masons to patch cracks lest the whole ledge widen. Yet budgets always find room. Spectacle is a civic necessity, like road repair or aqueduct maintenance. Humour survives too. A street mime later in the day will impersonate Septimius's mid-air pose, adding flapping chicken wings. Children will laugh, parents will hiss that it's bad form. Rome's attention span is short, while bones bleach below. Gossip already shifts to rumours that the Praetorian prefect might be next in line for a charge of extortion. The cliff never sleeps for long. As the crowd thins, the priest collects leftover incense grains, and a magistrate posts a small tablet listing the names and crimes in tidy capitals. It will stay for a fortnight before rain blurs the ink. By then, memory of the push will do the work. Few lessons are stickier than the sight of bodies turned to red blur against pale stone. Down in the Forum Tavern that evening, mugs clink and someone toasts Jupiter for keeping Rome safe. Another nods toward the direction of the cliff and mutters, "Better a safe fall into bed than an unsafe drop from the rock." Laughter follows, half nervous, half relieved. The city resumes its endless hum, debate, trade, theatre. Yet a faint shiver threads every conversation about loyalty or plots. Invisible fences often hold strongest. Next, ceremony will tilt again from open-air brutality to eerie silence. In a small, carefully walled pit east of the city, workers have already piled bricks and prepared a narrow tunnel. A Vestal virgin stands accused of breaking her vow, and Roman law demands a punishment no man may watch. The crowd at the Tarpeian ledge will not witness her end, but the story will echo from hearth to forum. Gather your courage and a quiet torch as we descend into the stillness of living burial. A low, late afternoon sun skims the rooftops as a hush drifts across Rome's forum, an odd stillness for a city that usually treats silence like a missing tax payment. Word has spread. A Vestal virgin named Aemilia has been judged unfaithful to her 30-year vow of chastity. For most crimes, Rome puts on a noisy show, but when a Vestal falls, the city changes key. The usual trumpets and floggers vanish. No crowd will see blood on sand or flesh on rock. Instead, the punishment moves behind a veil, becoming frightening precisely because almost nobody can watch. 6 Vestals guard the eternal flame of Vesta, hearth spirit of Rome, and the rolls list only a handful of broken vows across centuries. Their privileges are spectacular. Front row seats at games, their own coach in traffic, the power to free condemned men with a mere touch. So when one slips, every ear perks. Some whisper Aemilia loved a young cavalry officer, others insist she was framed by a jealous colleague. Officially, motive no longer matters. The Pontifex Maximus has ruled that her purity burned out like damp straw, and Roman law says polluted firewood must never return to the hearth. At dusk, the head priest and a line of lictors escort Aemilia from the house of the Vestals. She wears a plain white robe, rope belt knotted loosely, modest enough to blur her identity into an idea. She is no longer a person, but a cautionary tale. In one hand she carries a small oil lamp. The flame flickers, the last light she will tend. Along the sacred way, citizens step aside with eyes downcast. They fear that even a glance might share her guilt, the way smoke clings to clothes. The little procession turns away from the bustle, heading northwest toward a walled patch of ground just inside the Colline Gate. Romans call the place the Campus Sceleratus, the field of crime. No buildings pierce its bare soil, because nothing may ever rise where a Vestal is buried. Superstition insists bricks would crumble and roofs collapse. Earlier that morning, slaves dug a rectangular pit perhaps 2 meters deep, set a couch inside, then laid a loaf of bread, a small lamp, a jug of water, and a little dish of fruit beside it. These token comforts keep the priest's hands technically clean. The state is not killing Aemilia, it is simply placing her somewhere with enough supplies that, in theory, the gods themselves decide the moment of death. Even by Roman standards, the logic feels like a legal cartwheel. Cicero once joked that lawyers could argue a cow into being a horse if the fee were good enough. Here they argue a coffin into being a room. Yet the fiction matters. Vestals are sacred. Spilling their blood would stain Rome in ways no sacrifice could wash. Better to hide life away than to take it outright. Just outside the gate, the Pontifex Maximus stops and speaks a brief formula. Part prayer, part verdict. asking Vesta to accept the necessary purification. The words roll out flat and formal. Emotion would make the ritual untidy. Emilia nods once, a gesture more dignified than anyone expects. She has spent years learning composure, reciting laws, and offering grain at dawn ceremonies. Breaking down now would feel like dropping a torch onto the Capitol steps. Two attendants lead her down a ladder to the couch. From the rim, onlookers can see only the crown of her veil. She sits, places the lamp on the dirt floor, and folds her hands in her lap. No chains rattle, no nails pierce. All restraint comes from gravity and fear. One attendant climbs out, another follows, pulling the ladder behind. Carpenters waiting nearby slide a heavy wooden slab over the opening, hush thick as wet wool. Iron nails squeal as they drive them into holes pre-bored to speed the job. Finally, masons approach with buckets of packed earth, tamping every gap until the ground looks undisturbed, as though some careless farmer merely turned a patch of soil. There is no applause, no cheer. Even Rome's rowdiest gossips know better than to mock Vesta. Instead, people shuffle away in twos and threes, tugging cloaks tighter. Children pester parents with, "But why can't we help her?" The standard answer. The law is the law, feels thin tonight. Somewhere tavern singers will craft bawdy verses about secret lovers and buried treasure, yet those jokes will wait a few weeks. Fresh dread still coats the city like morning mist. Inside the pit, Emilia's lamp glows on rough walls, painting shadows that look like dancing figures. Fresh dirt gives off a raw mineral scent. She may try to measure the air by counting heartbeats or prayers, yet time slips in underground spaces. Ancient writers disagree on how long the buried Vestals live. One says days, another claims some starved within hours, but all note the same final silence. When augurs later open the pit to check that ritual is complete, they rarely speak of what they find. The practice is older than most temples. Livy records the burial of Oppia in 480 BCE. Tacitus nods grimly to Cornelia in 90 BCE, accused during Sulla's turbulent era. Each century adds a name or two, punctuating history like dark drumbeats. Modern archaeologists suspect the numbers remain low precisely because the sentence is so terrifying. It works as a ghost story whispered to every new acolyte. Guard the flame or the earth will swallow you. Yet Rome cannot resist strange humour. A playwright once staged a parody in which Hades complains that Vestals arrive talking non-stop about household budgets, driving him mad. The censors shut the play after one night. Some subjects are safe to tease only after a generous stretch of time. Practical fallout follows each burial. The College of Pontiffs must select a new girl, aged 6 to 10, from patrician families. Competing parents lobby hard. Service brings honour and a generous dowry when the 30 years end. Meanwhile, the remaining 5 Vestals perform extra shifts to keep the sacred hearth alight, their white gowns smudged with ash, faces tight from lack of sleep. Religion, like masonry, always needs spare hands. Days pass, the soil settles. When a light rain sprinkles the campus sceleratus, water beads and rolls down the slight mound above the hidden chamber. Some superstitious elders claim those droplets are Vesta's quiet tears. Farmers shake their heads, spring showers visit every hill, yet even skeptics avoid picnicking on that patch of ground. Memory, invisible yet heavy as a millstone, marks it forever. Rome recovers as it always does, by chattering, bargaining, building and invading. But the buried Vestal's story lingers. Whenever someone waxes lyrical about the city's mercy, another arches an eyebrow and reminds them of the silent pit. Soon the streets will buzz again with punishment of a lighter stripe, one that leaves bones intact but ego bruised. Imagine being marched down the main drag in a ragged, sullied toga while neighbours point and snicker. That's the toga of shame. a lesson in embarrassment with surprising bite. Lace up your sandals and straighten your cloak as we follow the laughing crowds to Rome's most humiliating parade. The bells of the Temple of Castor ring out noon, and the Forum is in full gossip mode when a bailiff's voice cuts through the market chatter. "Make way for the man who forged the weights," he bellows, as if announcing a visiting circus. Shoppers shuffle aside, snatching up baskets of olives and wheels of cheese lest they become accidental props in the spectacle. Only then does everyone spot the star of today's performance. Sextus Varro, once a respectable metal seller, now the embodiment of civic embarrassment. His clothing is the first punchline. Instead of the snowy toga every self-respecting citizen wears on public days, Sextus sports a tunic dyed patchy brown with cheap walnut husks and dragged through last night's bathhouse sludge for extra effect. A crooked wooden sign hangs from his neck reading Falsus Ponderator, Faker of Weights. Just in case anyone misses the letters, a helpful court usher follows close behind, repeating the charge in sing-song Latin like a street vendor hawking spiced nuts. Romans believe in matching penalty to misdeed. Sextus cheated scales. Now justice tilts the scale of dignity so hard it flips on his head. Two lictors, sticks tucked under arms, escort him at strolling pace, letting every onlooker drink in the sight. Children point, adults smirk, and a veteran water carrier shouts, "Hey Varro, your beard looks lighter than the last time. We should put it on the scales." Laughter ripples from marble colonnade to butcher's stall. Unlike our earlier tour stops, lions, crosses, sacks, and silent graves, the toga of shame leaves bodies unbroken. Yet to many Romans, loss of face can sting worse than the whip. The law calls it infamia, a civic stain that strips certain legal perks. You cannot testify in court, hold office, or even sit in the good seats at games. Imagine buying tickets only to learn your cushion now sits behind a pillar. That is infamia in a nutshell. Some governors improvise additions. In rough frontier towns, convicts in the parade may have heads shaved into uneven tufts, the mullet of dishonour, soldiers joke, or carry a clay jar labelled with their crime. Urban magistrates prefer sartorial satire. A butcher caught watering down garum fish sauce might be forced to lug a leaking amphora, the brine soaking his sandals while bystanders plug noses. Fraudulent lawyers are marched wearing scrolls taped to their arms like unwieldy sleeves, easy to trip on, harder to forget. Sextus's route threads past the rostra, down the Via Sacra, then loops back by the tabularium where state records live. Court clerks lean from windows to witness the walking footnote they will soon scratch onto wax tablets. "Let history show," they'll write, "that Sextus Varro served public shame on the nones of April with 120 denarii forfeited to the treasury." Centuries later, a bored scribe copying land deeds will stumble on that line and chuckle over lunch, proof that humiliation travels better than stone. Halfway down the avenue, a troupe of flute players, hired by the city for festivals but idle between gigs, falls in beside the procession. They launch into a chirpy march tune, improvising trills whenever Sextus trips over his sign rope. Some citizens tut at the mockery, others drop coppers into the musician's basket. Entertainment is entertainment. Even the court clerk tailing the group to verify compliance cracks a thin smile, though he'll deny it at tomorrow's staff meeting. Humiliation punishments aren't reserved for fraud. Senators found guilty of bribery might be ordered to stand barefoot outside the Senate House for a whole session, toga overhead like naughty schoolboys. Soldiers caught stealing comrades' rations march camp perimeter wearing half an ox yoke until sweat carves raw grooves in their shoulders. The point is visibility. A sin whispered in back alleys must be answered in the open air where tails sprout like figs in August. Still, Rome draws lines. Physical mutilation, branding cheeks, slicing ears, belongs to slave discipline, not civic shame. A Roman citizen may be mocked, fined, or exiled, but the body remains whole, a nod to the idea that citizenship carries inviolable dignity, no matter how tattered the garment above it. Critics call this high-minded hypocrisy, admirers call it civilization. Either way, the rule keeps tailors busy dyeing disgraceful tunics rather than stitching missing noses. Back to our parade. At the Arch of Augustus, Sextus's escort halts beside a makeshift platform. A junior magistrate climbs up, unfurls a narrow scroll, and reads the formal sentence. The speech takes barely a minute. Name, crime, fine, duration of infamia, 5 years, a steep term for forgery. Then comes the finale. A town crier steps forward, cups hands, and belts the call that ends every humiliation march. Let upright citizens take note and do better. It's as close as Roman justice gets to a motivational poster. Sextus is released on the spot, sign and all. Now comes the awkward part. He must navigate home through the very crowd that mocked him, hoping the walnut-dyed tunic buys anonymity once the sign comes off. History suggests his path won't be smooth. Shopkeepers may refuse service. Dinner invitations will dry up. Yet Rome's memory can be short. Pay your fine, lay low, make a show of sponsoring cheap public games, and neighbours may shrug by next harvest. Redemption here is not spiritual but transactional, coins, gestures, and time. Humour softens sharper edges. That evening, a puppet show near the theatre of Pompey features a tiny figure in a brown rag carrying an oversized scale that tips comically each time he tries to balance it. Children squeal, adults groan at the obvious reference. The puppet master pockets a better haul than usual, proving once again that shame, repackaged, is marketable. Our tour of punishments now nears its final act, and who better to host the closing party than Rome's madcap emperors? Caligula, Commodus, and a few lesser-known tyrants treated criminal justice like improv theatre, dreaming up penalties no law code could predict, feeding a yawning crowd to lions, sawing tables of senators in half during banquets, or fining courtiers for wearing shoes uglier than his own. Buckle your sandals as we step into a palace where whim outranks statute, and every nod from the throne can flip from favour to fatal in a heartbeat. Picture a palace corridor shining with gold leaf, marble floors polished to mirror brightness, and everywhere the little click-clack of nervous sandals. The victim is not here yet. In fact, he does not even know he is a victim. Under Rome's more eccentric emperors, punishment can strike like lightning on a cloudless day, because when one man wears the purple, law bends to mood. Caligula sets the tone. In the early months of his reign, he plays the generous prince, handing out bonuses, dining with commoners, racing chariots for laughs. Then an illness twists that sunny grin into something sharper. One afternoon at the games, he spots a section of spectators yawning between events. Annoyed, he snaps an order. Clear that row, feed them to the beasts next break. Guards hurry off, pluck 20 sleepy citizens from their seats, and by lunchtime the lions enjoy a surprise snack. The stadium crowd, suddenly wide-eyed, learns a fresh rule: boredom is treason. Palace banquets become testing grounds for what Caligula calls ingenia poenae, clever punishments. Arrive with sandals dusty, kneel so slaves can lick them clean, compliment his new cloak too politely. He might declare you in love with him and force you to parade the streets in bridal lace. One senator, old enough to know caution, praises the emperor's singing voice. Caligula grins and schedules a full concert at dawn, ordering the man to stand in the front row and applaud without pause. By the 50th encore, the senator's palms bleed, a quieter torture than flogging yet perfectly humiliating. Nero, Caligula's grandnephew, brings an artistic flair. He sees the world as a stage and himself the star, so crimes often involve blocking his spotlight. When a critic mutters that the emperor's playing sounds like a goat in a wine jar, Nero invites him to a private recital. 12 endless hours in a locked room. No break, no water, only music and the emperor's expectant gaze. The critic emerges half-deaf, fully terrified, and never reviews anything again. Nero also invents the fire garden. Suspected arsonists, tied to stakes coated in pitch, are lit at night to illuminate palace parties, human torches lining the walkways so guests can admire topiary by a hellish glow. Some sources blame Christians for feeling the brunt of this cruelty. Others say Nero merely needed scapegoats after Rome's Great Fire and preferred a dramatic backdrop to match his guilt. Fast forward to Commodus, the gladiator emperor. Where earlier rulers punished to assert divine distance, Commodus blurs lines for applause. He likes to stroll the arena in Hermes' boots, bow in hand, and shoot arrows tipped in crescent blades that slice ostrich necks clean. One day, a senator smiles at the wrong moment, perhaps amused by the bird's headless body still running. Commodus notices. Later, at supper, the emperor presents that senator with a carving knife and the roasted ostrich, head propped on the platter, beak gaping. He tells the poor man to carve while staring into the bird's glassy eyes, repeating, "Imagine it is me watching." The senator's hands shake so badly the knife slips and Commodus laughs. Fear served medium rare. Elagabalus, teenage priest-emperor of the sun god from Syria, prefers pranks that start funny and tilt sinister. He hosts banquets where guests sit on air-filled bladders sewn into couches. At a signal, slaves jab them, sending diners tumbling in togas. Sometimes rose-petal machines in the ceiling dump such heaps that unlucky nobles suffocate under the perfume storm. Strangely, no law code covers death by flowers, so scribes list causes as divine excess. What ties these punishments together is whim. Earlier chapters showed rules, however harsh, that citizens could understand and maybe avoid. Under emperors drunk on absolute power, predictability dies. A compliment may save you or doom you. Silence might look suspicious. The Senate still drafts laws, but everyone knows a nod from the throne overrides ink. Yet even tyranny likes an audience. Caligula stages thunderstorms indoors, using catapults to hurl roof tiles so guests cower as he booms like Jupiter. He fines a noble for having an uglier villa view than his own, claiming the offence hurts imperial eyes. Commodus taxes senators for not cheering loudly enough, measured by a scribe with a decibel drum. Nero invents a contest where losers must praise the winner's sweaty scent. Losing too enthusiastically risks accusation of sarcasm. Some Romans fight back with satire. Window scribblers carve jokes comparing Caligula's temper to a cracked chamber pot, explosive under pressure. Poets slip coded insults into love elegies, swapping emperor names for mythic tyrants. When guards catch them, punishments vary: night watch duty in winter, fines payable in amphorae of fish sauce, or forced attendance at a royal singing rehearsal. One poet, forced to accompany Nero on lyre for a week, later writes that he now fears strings more than swords. Historians debate exaggeration. Ancient gossip thrives on outrage, and later writers often hated these rulers. But buried ledgers confirm weird finds, like records of whole streets paying silence tax during Nero's nighttime singing tours. Graffiti in Pompeii shows a crude drawing of Caligula tossing coins to a lion with the caption, "Feed us next." Truth flexes, but the backbone stands. Emperors could and did turn punishment into personal theatre. By the time soldiers conspire to end each reign, Caligula stabbed in a corridor, Commodus strangled in his bath, Elagabalus dragged into the Tiber, citizens breathe easier. The next emperor usually promises a return to steady laws. For a while, crowds believe, until whispers claim this new ruler fancies inventing a punishment involving eels and poetry recitals, and everyone tenses again. Our tour of bizarre penalties nears its final curtain. Step back for a moment and picture the map we have walked. It starts on a riverbank with a writhing leather sack, slithers through lion-filled arenas, drills holes in discipline with decimation, lifts bodies onto roadside crosses, pounds a deserter in a gauntlet of clubs, tips traitors off a cliff, lowers a vestal into silence, drags a cheat through a laughing street, and finally drops us in a palace where an emperor's mood writes the rules. That is a lot of mileage, and every mile tells us something about how Rome held itself together. First, fear is cheap, and the Romans knew it. One execution in public, well advertised, can save a governor years of jail upkeep. A single crucifixion planted by a busy highway speaks louder than any stack of law scrolls. Poena Cullei, damnatio ad bestias, and the Tarpeian Rock all follow the same budget plan. Spend a little wood, leather, or gravity up front, let rumour carry the rest for free. Second, spectacle is sticky. People remember stories that come with sights, smells, and noises. Ask any Roman child which crime parricide is, and they will shout, "The sack with the monkey." A modern court file may be thicker, but 20 years later nobody recalls page 327, line 14. They do remember the afternoon the town square smelled of roasting pitch because Nero wanted party lights. Trauma fixes memory. Rome wove that truth into policy. Yet fear alone never keeps an empire alive for centuries. Rome paired terror with a promise. Obey, and you too can watch from the good seats, and maybe even cheer. The Colosseum set commoners beside senators beneath one sky, united in the thrill of seeing someone else pay the price. Shared pleasure builds a strange social glue. The games were citizenship class disguised as entertainment. Still, the knife cuts both ways. When power turns personal, justice becomes a guessing game. Caligula feeds a bored audience to lions. Nero lights gardens with the accused. Under emperors who treat law like pottery clay, even the innocent lose sleep. Stability needs limits, written or unwritten, and Rome's worst rulers snapped those limits for fun. Their reigns burned bright but brief, because armies, senators, and city mobs finally balk when tomorrow's rulebook depends on breakfast moods. The punishments also show a clear ladder of privilege. A poor thief gets claws. A citizen thief gets a dirty tunic and laughs. A slave runs. He's a living torch. A senator plots revolt. He might end up exiled to a cushy villa unless the cliff calls. Rome said all were subjects of the law, yet the body blows always fell harder on those lower down the marble steps. That imbalance sparks rebellions, reforms, and eventually the moral outrage of later ages. Did any good come from the cruelty? Roman jurists argued yes. Harsh penalties deterred treason, guarded sacred vows, kept armies sharp, and protected trade routes. Modern thinkers reply that the same goals can be reached without lions or cliffs. The truth sits somewhere between. Rome's harshness brought quick results in a violent world, but it also welded cruelty into the state's DNA. A flaw that finally turned citizens against certain emperors and fed new faiths preaching mercy. We, watching from 2,000 years away, can choose our own takeaway. We can gasp at the cruelty, laugh at the absurdity, and breathe relief that our speeding tickets do not involve bears. More usefully, we can ask whether our systems rely on spectacle or fairness, whether shame builds stronger bonds than rehabilitation, and whether power anywhere still hides a taste for improv justice. History will keep marching, sandals or no sandals. But if you ever need motivation to stay on the honest path, picture the dog, the rooster, the snake, and the monkey squirming in that leather sack, or the long, lonely drop from a cliff barely wider than a doorway. Rome paid a high price to engrave those images on the world's memory. Let's at least collect the wisdom without repeating the cost. And with that, the torch goes out, the arena sands settle, and the stage hands of time sweep up. Thank you for coming on this journey with me tonight. If you enjoyed this story, I'd appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, and maybe even comment on other places you would like to visit, and I'll try and make it happen. May sound sleep and beautiful dreams come to you tonight, my friend. You deserve it.